The Marine drove through the quiet streets of his hometown, streets he had not seen in over 20 years. The buildings seemed smaller somehow, and the trees had grown taller, shading roads he once knew so well. Everything felt familiar yet different. There was a strange weight in his chest as he passed by the old school, where he had spent his childhood, the corner store where he had bought candy with his best friend, and the park where they had spent countless summer afternoons playing catch and talking about the future. Time had moved forward, but for him these memories remained frozen, etched in his mind as clearly as if they had happened yesterday. He had been away for so long, carried by the winds of duty and necessity, never quite able to return. The life he had built as a Marine had taken him across oceans and deserts, through cities of glass and streets of sand, and yet nothing had prepared him for the pull of home. Today he was not coming back for the sights or the nostalgia. Today he was coming back for a promise he had never made but had carried nonetheless, the promise to visit his best friend's grave. 20 years had passed since that day. That day he could never erase from his memory. His friend had been more than a companion in the trenches. He had been a brother, a constant presence in the chaos of life and war. The thought of seeing his grave after so long made his stomach tighten and his palms sweat. He had imagined this moment countless times, but imagining it was nothing compared to actually living it. The cemetery came into view, tucked quietly between rows of houses and shaded by old oaks. It was smaller than he had remembered, intimate and serene. The entrance was marked by a wrought iron gate, its paint peeling slightly with age. Beyond it lay the rows of headstones, some weathered by time, some freshly carved, each one telling a story of life lived and lost. He parked his car near the edge, the engine's hum fading into silence, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. The air smelled of earth and grass, of rain and time. He stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel path. With each step, memories surged forward, laughs shared in the barracks, nights spent talking about dreams and fears, the last conversation they had before the mission that had changed everything. He closed his eyes, letting the sounds of the cemetery wash over him, grounding him, preparing him for what he was about to face. This was not just a visit. It was a confrontation with his past, with all the emotions he had buried deep inside. As he walked through the cemetery, he noticed the different headstones, some tall and ornate, others simple and modest. Each name carved into stone was a reminder of lives that had left a mark, of stories ended too soon. And then he saw it, his friend's grave, simple yet perfectly maintained as if someone had been there recently. The name on the headstone was familiar, bringing a lump to his throat. The date struck him harder than he expected. 20 years had passed, and yet it felt like only yesterday. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes tracing the words engraved into the stone. He could feel the years of absence pressing down on him, the weight of unspoken words and unresolved grief. His hand hovered over the grave, hesitant, unsure whether to touch it or simply stand in silent remembrance. He wanted to speak, to apologize for all the times he had not been there, to share the life he had lived without his friend by his side. But the words stuck in his throat, choked by emotion. Then he noticed her, a woman standing quietly near the grave, tending to the flowers. She moved with care, her hands brushing against petals, arranging them gently. Her face was angled downward, focused, serene yet carrying a subtle sadness. She did not notice him at first, and he watched for a moment, unsure whether to approach or retreat. The sight of her stirred a mixture of curiosity and caution in him. Who was she? And why was she here after all these years? He took a tentative step closer, trying not to make a sound, yet aware that any movement might alert her. She looked up briefly as if sensing his presence, and their eyes met for a moment. There was a flicker of recognition in her expression, not of him, but of someone who understood loss, someone who had also come here carrying a heart heavy with memory. The connection was silent, wordless, yet profound. In that instant, he realized that the grave was not a place of solitude alone. It was a meeting point of shared grief and remembrance. He cleared his throat softly, unsure how to begin. "Hello," he said, his voice low, rough from disuse. The woman turned fully, her expression curious but calm. She did not speak immediately, and he felt the tension of those first moments where strangers, connected by memory and loss, must find their footing. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was gentle, steady, and carried a warmth that surprised him. "Can I help you?" she asked. There was no judgment in her tone, only an openness that invited trust. He nodded, unsure of what to say. Words seemed inadequate to bridge the 20-year gap, to explain the decades of absence and the weight of shared sorrow. He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs and steady his shaking hands. I'm here to visit my friend, he said simply. It's been a long time. The words felt clumsy, insufficient, but they were honest. She nodded, understanding more than his words could convey. There was a quiet acknowledgement between them, a recognition that the bond with the one they had lost was still alive, living in memory and in the act of remembrance. The woman returned to tending the flowers, her movements deliberate and thoughtful. The Marine watched her for a moment, noting the care she took, the reverence in her gestures. He realized that someone had been keeping this grave alive all these years, nurturing it as if it were a living tribute. It made him feel a strange mix of relief and melancholy. He was not alone in his grief. Someone had shared it silently, faithfully all this time. He stepped closer to the grave, finally allowing himself to touch the cold stone. His fingers traced the letters of his friend's name, feeling the carved depth, the permanence. Memories flooded back, unbidden. The sound of laughter echoing in the barracks, the camaraderie of shared missions, the last look they had exchanged before the mission that had ended it all. He closed his eyes, letting the emotions wash over him, regret, sadness, but also gratitude for having known such a friend. For a while they stood in silence, two strangers connected by the memory of someone they had both loved. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and flowers, the quiet sounds of life continuing around the cemetery. In that silence, the Marine felt something shift inside him, a small easing of the tension he had carried for 20 years. The presence of the woman, her quiet dedication, reminded him that grief did not have to be borne alone. He finally spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I never thought I'd make it back here. The woman looked at him, her eyes soft but knowing. Life takes us far away, she said gently. But some bonds, they bring us back. He nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deep within him. The Marine took a step back, observing the grave from a slight distance, watching her tend to it. There was a rhythm to her movements, a quiet grace, and it reminded him that memory could be active, alive, not just a shadow in the mind. He realized that visiting this place was not just about mourning the past. It was about acknowledging it, honoring it, and finding a way to carry it forward. He lingered for a few more moments, letting the peace of the cemetery sink in. The sound of birds, the gentle rustle of leaves, the smell of earth. It all seemed to speak to him, telling him that he was where he needed to be. He felt the tightness in his chest ease slightly, replaced by a contemplative calm. The encounter with the woman had stirred questions and curiosity, but also a sense of connection he had not expected. Finally, he took one last look at the grave, at the woman, at the place where memory and presence intersected. He felt a mixture of sorrow and hope, understanding that grief could be shared, that the past could be acknowledged without being a burden. With a slow, deliberate breath, he turned back toward the path leading out of the cemetery, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey, one that would bring him closer to understanding, to closure, and perhaps to unexpected friendships. He walked away, each step lighter than the last, carrying the weight of memory with a newfound grace. The cemetery receded behind him, the trees casting long shadows in the afternoon sun, and the Marine knew that he would return. The grave, the memories, and the woman tending them would all be part of a story that was not yet finished, a story that would unfold in ways he could not yet imagine. The Marine paused at the edge of the grave, unsure of how to bridge the silence that had settled between him and the woman. He could see the care she had taken in arranging the flowers, the small vase balanced carefully on the ground, the gentle sweep of her hands over the petals. There was a quiet dignity in the way she moved, as if every gesture was a tribute to the person who lay beneath the stone. It made him feel both intrusive and grateful at the same time. He wanted to speak, to ask questions, but he was wary of overstepping. After a long moment, he cleared his throat gently. I didn't mean to disturb you, he said, his voice low and steady, though he could feel the tremor in it. She looked up at him, her eyes calm but curious, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough to signal that he could stay, that she did not consider him a stranger to be shooed away. I come here every so often, she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that seemed to soften the air between them. It helps me remember, and to keep him close even if he's not here anymore. The Marine nodded slowly, feeling a lump in his throat. He understood that sentiment more than he could express. Memory was both a comfort and a burden, a tether to a past that refused to let go. He took a hesitant step closer, keeping his gaze on the grave. I'm here to remember him too, he said. He was my best friend. We grew up together and we served together. I never had the chance to come back until now. His voice caught slightly at the last words. The 20 years of absence weighed heavily on him, and the silence of the cemetery amplified the emotion he had tried to suppress for decades. The woman looked at him then, really looked at him, her eyes tracing the lines on his face, the uniform posture that hinted at discipline, the subtle scars of life that told their own story. She seemed to weigh his words, and then she nodded slowly. I understand, she said simply. He had friends who mattered to him, people who carried him in their hearts even when he was gone. Her tone was gentle but firm, a recognition that only someone who had loved deeply could give. The Marine swallowed hard. It was strange to hear someone speak of his friend in this way, acknowledging the bond he had felt so strongly, yet lost for so long. He wanted to ask more, to know who she was, why she was here, but the right words eluded him. Instead, he settled for standing quietly, letting the moment stretch, giving himself time to process the sight of someone else who had loved and lost the same person he had. Finally, curiosity overcame hesitation. May I ask who you are? He said gently. The woman's expression softened, a quiet sadness appearing behind her calm exterior. She seemed to consider the question carefully, as if deciding how much of her life to reveal to a stranger who had suddenly appeared at this intimate place. I was his wife, she said at last, her voice steady but tinged with the faintest quiver. The Marine felt a jolt of recognition and surprise, quickly followed by a wave of understanding. She had shared a life with the friend he had lost, a life he had never known about. For a moment, the weight of unspoken years pressed down on him. He realized how little he truly knew of his friend's life after his own departure. The woman seemed to sense his thoughts and offered a small, sad smile. We were married for a short time, but it was enough to mean everything. He was my world. Her hands rested lightly on the flowers, tracing the edges as if drawing strength from the memory. The Marine could feel the depth of her grief, a grief that was mirrored in his own heart. They were both carrying the same loss in different ways across different years. He nodded slowly, the words catching in his throat. I never knew. I'm sorry, he said, the apology spilling out with more emotion than he intended. She shook her head gently. There's nothing to be sorry for, she replied. Life took you away, and he understood that. He always understood. That's why he loved you as a friend. And that's why he would have wanted you to come here, to remember him, to see that he mattered. The Marine looked down at the grave, feeling the cold stone under his fingertips. Memories of his friend flashed vividly in his mind. The way he had laughed in the barracks, the times they had stayed up talking through long nights, the missions they had faced together, and the last look they had exchanged before he had been taken away. The memory was painful, but there was also comfort in recalling it. It reminded him of the bond that had never truly been broken. The woman noticed the change in his expression and softened further. He spoke of you often, she said quietly. Even after he was gone, I kept the letters he wrote me, and sometimes he mentioned his friends from before. You were one of those friends. He trusted you, and he loved the memories you shared. I think he would have been happy to see you here today. Her words were gentle, but they carried a weight that pressed on the Marine's heart in a way both painful and healing. He breathed deeply, letting the words sink in, feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and gratitude. There was so much he had never known, so much he had missed, but there was also a strange relief in finally being able to connect with someone who shared the same love and loss. For the first time in 20 years, he felt the beginnings of a bridge between past and present, a connection that might help him carry the memory without the crushing weight of absence. The woman moved a small step closer to the grave, her eyes scanning the flowers as if searching for something lost or perhaps preserving something precious. He wanted us to remember him with life, she said softly. To live and to keep loving even when he couldn't. That's why I come here, to feel close to him and to honor the life he left behind. Her words struck a chord in the Marine. He realized that visiting the grave was not just about mourning. It was also about remembering the joy, the love, and the strength of the person who had lived, and finding a way to carry that forward. He nodded again, slowly, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't experienced in decades. "I understand now," he said. I think I needed to see that. To understand that he wanted us to keep living even without him. I've carried so much guilt, so much regret. But maybe today I can let some of it go." The woman looked at him with a quiet intensity, as if she could see the turmoil within him and the shift that was beginning. "It's never easy," she said. "Grief doesn't have a timeline, but sharing it, remembering together, it makes it lighter somehow. It makes it real, and it keeps him alive in our hearts." The Marine felt a warmth in his chest, a fragile hope that perhaps the heavy burden he had carried alone for so many years could now be shared. He could talk, he could remember, he could honor the past without letting it consume him. The presence of this woman, someone who had loved his friend as deeply as he had, was a balm to his weary spirit. They stood in silence for a while, side by side, both lost in thought yet connected by memory and presence. The wind whispered through the cemetery, the leaves rustled gently, and the birds sang faintly in the distance. The Marine could feel the weight of 20 years lifting, little by little, replaced by the quiet acknowledgement that memory, love and grief could coexist, and that shared remembrance had the power to heal. Eventually, the Marine took a small step forward, closer to the woman. Would you tell me about him? About the years I missed?" he asked, his voice tentative but sincere. She looked at him, a faint smile forming on her lips, and nodded. "I can," she said, "and I will. There's so much to share, so many stories, and it feels right that you should hear them." He nodded, feeling a sense of anticipation, a mix of nervousness and eagerness. For the first time in 2 decades, he felt like he was not alone in his grief, and that the story of his friend's life, his joy, his struggles, his love, could finally be shared and honored. The connection they had formed, born from sorrow and respect, promised a journey of discovery, healing, and understanding. As they began to talk, sharing memories and experiences, the Marine realized that this encounter was more than coincidence. It was fate, guiding him back to a place where he could reconcile with the past, honor his friend, and find a connection that transcended time and absence. In the quiet cemetery, amidst the flowers and the whispers of leaves, he felt the first stirrings of closure and the fragile hope of a renewed sense of purpose. The Marine and the woman continued to stand near the grave, the silence stretching for a few moments as they both gathered their thoughts. Then she began to speak softly, as though speaking the words aloud would somehow bring the past closer and make it alive again. She told him stories about the years he had missed, stories that painted a vivid picture of his friend's life, the life that had continued even after the Marine had gone away. She spoke of small things first, the way he had loved a certain cup of coffee, the way he would always insist on watching the sunrise before starting his day, the laughter they shared over the simplest jokes. The Marine listened closely, each word a brushstroke painting the man he had known in new colors, revealing sides of his friend that had been hidden from him all these years. It was like rediscovering someone familiar yet unknown, a mix of nostalgia and revelation that tugged at his heart. She then moved on to more personal moments that showed the depth of their bond and the love they had shared. He had been devoted, she said, always considerate and attentive, always finding ways to make her feel valued and loved. The Marine could picture him now, the same courage and loyalty he had seen in the battlefield now channeled into daily life, in the quiet moments of companionship. It brought tears to his eyes to hear how much his friend had cherished those around him. As she continued, the Marine felt a mix of sorrow and comfort. He mourned the years he had missed, the laughter and conversations he would never share, the milestones and memories he had been absent for. But he also felt relief that his friend's life had been full, rich, and meaningful even without him there. The woman's words created a bridge across the years, allowing him to step into a past he could never reclaim physically, but could now honor in memory and heart. She pulled a small box from her bag, worn and delicate, as if it had been carried carefully through time. Inside were letters, photographs, and small mementos from their life together. She handed him one of the letters, explaining that it was from a time shortly before his friend's last mission. The Marine held it gently, feeling the weight of its significance. As he read, he saw the words not just as letters on paper, but as a testament to his friend's courage, love, and hope. It was as if he were speaking to him across the years, sharing what he could no longer say in person. The woman spoke of the challenges his friend faced, the fears, doubts, and struggles that came with life and service. She described how he often worried about leaving loved ones behind, how he tried to find balance between duty and personal happiness. The Marine could relate to these struggles, having faced similar conflicts in his own life. There was a connection forming here, not just between him and the woman, but between him and the memory of his friend, a thread of shared understanding woven across time and circumstance. Then she shared stories of their shared laughter, the joy they found in each other's company, and the small adventures that brought light to ordinary days. The Marine listened, smiling through tears, feeling a warmth that he hadn't realized he had been missing. It was more than nostalgia. It was a rekindling of connection, a way to feel his friend's presence in the world even after so many years. He realized that this was a gift, a chance to experience again the companionship that had once been his anchor. As the afternoon sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the cemetery, they continued their conversation, each story and memory weaving a tapestry of life, loss, and love. The Marine felt the layers of grief that had burdened him begin to shift, softening under the light of shared remembrance. It was painful, yes, but it was also healing. The act of speaking aloud, of sharing the past with someone who understood, gave him a sense of release, a feeling that perhaps he could carry the memories without being crushed by them. She spoke of his friend's dreams, the ambitions he had held, and the small victories he had celebrated. She described how he had always spoken of his friends with pride, how he had hoped to see them again to share the successes and challenges of life. The Marine felt a pang of regret, but also a deep appreciation for the love and loyalty that had endured even in absence. It was a reminder that connections of the heart do not fade with time or distance. They linger, waiting to be recognized and honored. The conversation then moved to moments of sorrow and hardship, the struggles that had shaped his friend into the person he became. She spoke of losses endured, obstacles overcome, and the resilience that had carried him through difficult times. The Marine felt a renewed respect for the strength his friend had shown, both in life and in the face of death. It reminded him that courage was not only measured in battle, but in how one navigates life's inevitable hardships. Through it all, there was a sense of intimacy and trust growing between the Marine and the woman. They were two people connected by love and loss, two hearts finding solace in shared memory. The woman spoke not only to fill in the gaps of the past, but to acknowledge the Marine's grief, to validate the emotions he had carried alone for so long. In turn, he shared his own experiences, the missions he had survived, the moments of fear and courage that had defined his own journey. It was a mutual exchange, a healing dialogue that neither had anticipated but both needed. The sun continued to lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the Marine realized they had been talking for hours. Yet the stories continued, one leading naturally into another, each one revealing more about the friend they both had loved. The letters and photographs served as anchors, tangible reminders of a life that had been vibrant and meaningful. The Marine could feel the presence of his friend as vividly as if he were standing beside them, listening and smiling at the connections being forged across time. The woman paused, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and warmth. He wanted us to remember him fully, to see not just the loss but the life he lived, she said quietly. The Marine nodded, understanding the depth of her words. It was a reminder that grieving was not just about mourning death, but celebrating life, acknowledging the moments of joy and love that had made it worth living. He felt a shift within himself, a subtle but powerful release of the guilt and regret he had carried for 20 years. The act of hearing about his friend's life, of sharing the memory with someone who had loved him in a different but equally profound way, was transformative. It allowed him to honor the past without being imprisoned by it, to carry the memory forward as a source of strength rather than sorrow. As the light of day began to fade, they stood together quietly, watching the shadows lengthen across the cemetery. The Marine realized that the bond he had shared with his friend was not gone. It had evolved, extended through the woman who had loved him, and now connected to him once more. There was a sense of continuity, of a story that did not end with death but continued through memory, love, and shared experience. Finally, the Marine spoke, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you for sharing all of this with me. I feel like I've known him all over again, and it's helping me find a place for all these years of memories and regrets." The woman smiled softly, a quiet affirmation of the understanding they had built together. "He would have wanted you to know," she said. "To carry the good, the joy, and even the sorrow with love. That's how we honor him." He nodded, taking a deep breath as he looked at the grave, the letters, the flowers, and the woman who had brought his friend's memory alive again. There was a sense of peace settling over him, fragile but real. He knew there were still emotions to work through, stories to hear, and moments of reflection ahead. But for the first time in decades, he felt a sense of connection, of shared remembrance that made the weight of the past lighter. As night approached and the cemetery grew quieter, they gathered the letters and photographs, placing them back carefully into the box. The Marine felt gratitude for the opportunity to reconnect, not only with the memory of his friend but also with someone who had loved him as deeply. It was a reminder that love and memory could transcend time, that grief could be shared and transformed into something that nurtured the heart. Before leaving, they stood together one last time at the grave, two people connected by a shared past and a bond forged through loss and remembrance. The Marine felt a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet determination to honor his friend's memory by living fully, by cherishing the connections he still had, and by carrying the stories of the past with him. It was a beginning, not an ending, and in that moment, he understood that remembrance was not just about looking back, but moving forward with the heart full of love, respect, and hope. The Marine sat quietly, listening as the woman continued to recount stories he had never heard before. Each revelation brought a new perspective, a deeper understanding of the man he had once called his best friend. There were letters he had written to her that had never been sent, journals filled with thoughts, fears, and hopes he had never known existed. As she carefully unfolded these pieces of the past, the Marine felt a sense of awe and humility. These documents revealed a side of his friend that had been hidden, private, and sacred. She handed him a worn journal, its leather cover soft from years of handling. "He wanted you to read this someday," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of meaning. The Marine took it reverently, opening it with trembling hands. The pages were filled with handwriting that seemed alive, full of emotion and personality. He read through entries describing missions, fears, and reflections on friendship, loyalty, and life. He saw how deeply his friend valued the people around him, how much he had cared for those he left behind. Some passages made him smile through tears, recalling shared jokes and moments of courage that mirrored their time together in the Marines. Others brought a lump to his throat, accounts of fear, pain, and the heavy burden of responsibility he had carried in silence. The Marine realized that his friend had faced battles not only on the field but within himself, struggles that he had never shared openly, even with his closest companion. This understanding brought a mix of sorrow and admiration. The woman added context to the entries, filling in gaps and explaining events he had never known about. He learned how his friend had quietly supported family members, extended kindness to strangers, and maintained hope even in the darkest moments. These revelations painted a fuller picture of a man who had been brave, loyal, and profoundly human. The Marine felt humbled by the depth of his friend's character, grateful to witness it now even after so many years. Then she spoke of moments that were personal, intimate glimpses into their life together. She described small acts of love, shared dreams, and the quiet conversations that had filled their home with warmth. The Marine listened intently, understanding for the first time the life his friend had led beyond the battlefield. Each story was a thread weaving together the fabric of a life fully lived, a life that had touched many hearts, including his own, in ways he had never imagined. There were letters his friend had written specifically for the Marine, letters he had never sent. The woman explained that he had wanted him to have these messages after some time had passed, hoping they would offer comfort, guidance, and connection. The Marine carefully opened them, his hands shaking slightly. The words were heartfelt, expressing gratitude for their friendship, recounting shared memories, and encouraging him to continue living fully. He felt as if his friend were speaking directly to him from beyond the years, a voice bridging the gap between past and present. Some letters contained apologies, acknowledging the pain caused by his absence, and expressing understanding for the life the Marine had built while he was away. Reading these words, he felt a sense of release, a lifting of the guilt that had weighed on him for 2 decades. The letters were more than messages. They were a lifeline, connecting him to a friendship that had never truly ended. It was a profound moment, one that stirred emotions he had long suppressed. The woman observed his reactions, offering gentle guidance and reassurance. She spoke of her husband's intentions, his wishes, and the hope that he wanted his friends to carry forward his legacy. "He trusted you," she said quietly. "Even after all this time, he knew you would understand and honor what mattered to him." The Marine nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deeply within him. It was a reminder that the bonds forged in friendship endure, even in the face of loss. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cemetery, they continued to explore the letters and journals. Each document revealed layers of personality, moments of joy, struggle, and reflection that had previously been hidden from the Marine. He was struck by the depth of thought and emotion in every entry, realizing how much he had missed while serving far away. Yet he also felt a profound sense of connection, as if his friend were still present, guiding him, comforting him, and reminding him of the strength of their bond. She shared memories of times when his friend had thought of him, had wondered where he was, and had hoped for a reunion. These stories were tinged with sadness but also with hope, illustrating the enduring power of friendship and love. The Marine felt a renewed sense of purpose, inspired to honor these memories and carry them forward in his own life. It was a gift, one he had never anticipated, yet now treasured more than anything. The conversation shifted to the emotional impact of loss, and the woman shared her own experiences of grief, coping, and remembering. She spoke of the moments of doubt, the quiet nights of longing, and the ways in which she had found strength in memory and in the love of others. The Marine listened attentively, realizing that grief could be shared, that the pain of loss could be eased through connection and understanding. It was a lesson he had never fully appreciated until now. They spoke of forgiveness, both for oneself and for circumstances beyond control. The Marine reflected on the guilt he had carried for leaving, for surviving when his friend had not. Through their dialogue, he began to understand that his friend had wanted him to live fully, to embrace life despite the losses endured. This revelation brought a sense of peace he had never thought possible, a quiet reassurance that he could honor the past without being imprisoned by it. As night settled over the cemetery, the Marine felt a profound shift within himself. The letters, journals, and stories had illuminated aspects of his friend's life that he had never known, yet had always hoped to understand. He felt closer to the man he had called his best friend, connected not only through shared memories but through the insights revealed by the woman who had loved him. It was a connection that transcended time, distance, and even death itself. The woman carefully packed the letters and journals back into the box, her movements deliberate and reverent. "These are treasures," she said softly. "They are reminders of a life lived fully, and of the love and loyalty that endure." The Marine nodded, feeling gratitude and reverence for the gift she had shared with him. It was more than documents or stories. It was a bridge to the past, a pathway to understanding, and a means of healing. Before they left the cemetery, they stood together one last time near the grave. The Marine placed his hand lightly on the stone, feeling the cold surface beneath his palm, a connection to a friend who had shaped his life in countless ways. The woman stood beside him, a silent witness to the shared bond of love, loss, and remembrance. They both understood that this was not the end of the story but a continuation, a living tribute to a life that had touched them both. The Marine felt a sense of closure beginning to form, fragile but undeniable. He realized that the journey of grief and remembrance was ongoing, yet he now carried a sense of peace, connection, and understanding. The lessons of the past, the stories and the letters had given him insight into the man his friend had been, the love he had shared, and the legacy he had left behind. It was a gift that would guide him, comfort him, and inspire him in the years to come. As they walked toward the cemetery gate, the night air was cool and calm. The Marine felt the weight of the past lessen, replaced by a quiet determination to honor his friend's memory through action, reflection, and connection. He understood that remembrance was an active process, a way of keeping love alive even when those who had given it were no longer present. And in that moment he felt a deep gratitude for the woman who had shared these stories, the letters, and the insights that had made it all possible. Before parting ways, the woman spoke again, her voice gentle and steady. He would have wanted you to know everything, to understand and to carry forward the joy and love he experienced. That's the truest way to honor him. The Marine nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate within him. It was a message that would stay with him, guiding his actions, thoughts, and memories in the days and years ahead. As he walked away from the cemetery that night, he felt lighter than he had in decades. The shadows of grief had not vanished entirely, but they were tempered by understanding, connection, and the shared remembrance of a life fully lived. The letters, the stories, and the presence of the woman had created a bridge between the past and the present, offering solace and insight in ways he could never have anticipated. He knew that this journey was far from over, that there would be more conversations, more reflections, and more moments of memory to explore. But for now, he felt a sense of hope, of reconciliation with the past, and of a renewed connection to a friend whose life had been extraordinary in its love, loyalty, and humanity. And in that hope he found the strength to carry forward, honoring the memory of a man who had shaped his life in ways both profound and enduring. The Marine returned to the cemetery the next morning, the soft light of dawn spilling across the rows of gravestones. There was a quiet peace in the air, the kind that comes from early hours when the world is still waking up. He felt a mixture of anticipation and calm as he approached his best friend's grave, knowing that today would be different. He was not coming alone in spirit. He carried the stories, letters, and memories shared by the woman, each one a thread connecting him to the man he had lost so long ago. As he walked along the path, he saw her there again, tending to the flowers with the same quiet care as before. She looked up and smiled, a warm greeting that eased the lingering tension in his chest. It was remarkable to him how much comfort one human presence could bring, especially someone who shared the depth of love and loss he felt. They exchanged a few words, but it was the silent understanding, the shared acknowledgement of memory and grief, that held the most weight. The Marine knelt by the grave, placing a hand gently on the cool stone. He thought of all the moments, the laughter, the shared fears, and the promises of friendship that had defined their bond. The memories were vivid, yet tinged with the sadness of years lost. He closed his eyes and let himself feel the full spectrum of emotion, grief, regret, love, and gratitude. It was a release he had not experienced in decades, a catharsis brought on by presence, memory, and shared acknowledgement. The woman joined him, standing quietly beside the grave. She placed a hand over his, a simple gesture of connection that spoke volumes. It reminded him that grief could be shared, that it did not have to be carried alone. Her presence was both grounding and healing, a living reminder of the person who had loved his friend and honored his memory. They stood together in silence, letting the morning air and the gentle light surround them, carrying the weight of years, yet also offering a sense of renewal.